don't think it helped that since that time you've had over 35 young African-American children who happen to attend Chicago public schools to be killed on the streets of Chicago. I don't think it helped that just a few days before the announcement of the Olympics, that probably one of the worst beatings that we've seen, not that has occurred, that we've seen was plastered all over the tube internationally. So what those things did do was reinforce the idea and the stereotype and the myth of Chicago being a gangster town. It's just that originally they associated gangsters with the Al Capones and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I'm not pleased to say that in most instances those images were young black children upholding or reinforcing that myth. And I think we need to really deal with how we got to this point. There's a very true statement that I use when I talk about any of this, is that we don't always have control over what people do to us, but we do have control over how we respond to what they do to us. And I'm saying from a perspective that these young children are acting out based on conditions that have been laid before them that they have no control over. And they're not developed. They're young, they're immature, and they're doing what young people do. If they're not properly guided, if adults are not adults, and when people ostracize them. I am stunned to hear black people act as though these young people dropped out of Mars or somewhere and they don't belong to us. From a historical perspective, black children did not invent violence. Black children or black people do not have a corner on violence. Just like everything else in this society, black people have assimilated and they've adopted the ways of this culture. I can go back. One of the benefits of being older is that you have lived history. One of the benefits of knowing how to read is that you can experience history through other people's eyes or vicariously. And we can go back in history in this country when the wave of European immigrants in this country was occurring via Ellis Island into New York and the East Coast, and there evolved a group of young ethnic whites who became notorious, who were known as the Bowery Boys. And the behavior of the Bowery Boys and youth gangs like the Bowery Boys resulted in the organizations, the white Irish Catholic organizations coming together and saying, hold on, you all are going to be a part of this country, and so we have to intervene. And we have to provide you with the resources and the guidance and the schooling and the love and the protection that you need to guide you into that process, into adulthood. They didn't have commercials and PSAs on popular radio stations like V103 and Power 106.3 with black radio personalities such as Steve Harvey and the other guy offering rewards for the conviction of these black men. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you didn't live in the immediate community of the Bowery Boys or maybe a little bit out from there, you didn't know that they were wreaking havoc on the entire community. And the beatdown that we witnessed and the killing that we witnessed on 111th Street, even though it was fatal, it was not anything less than what they did on a regular basis in the Boweries. And so if you've heard of Boys Town, if you've heard of Father Flanagan, if you've heard of reformatories, those things were created for white juvenile delinquents. And instead of us speaking in terms of developing institutions that will allow for these children to be monitored in a way through this time in their lives until they get some sense as adults. We're throwing them under the bus. We're saying that they don't belong to us. We're saying that, you know, we don't want them. And that's ignorant. And we have to understand that when we do that, I mean, you're throwing away your future. But another thing that we really have to look at from a socioeconomic, political perspective is that there are conditions. There are conditions that exist over a period of time that allow for people to get to a point where they become so angry and they act out so savagely and so violently that we have to look at in terms of those conditions. And those conditions in this case, and people are now beginning to understand it, those young people in this particular incident, because that's not the first beatdown I've ever seen. That's the first one I've seen on video. But those young people are doing what happens in every situation where people are in the position of what we may call refugees. These young people are from, well, they were displaced. Let's just put it out there. They were displaced by policy, public policy. Their homes were destroyed. The only home they knew, it may have been raggedy, it may not have been up to par, it may have been subpar, but the point is, it was home. And within home, public housing, they had a culture. And within the context of that culture, which many would say is a subculture, they had a sub-economy. They had a way of getting food and clothing and other things. And they also had a community. They had friends. They had schools. Now, maybe the schools were subpar, and they were. And maybe they didn't attend on a regular basis and they didn't meet the test scores and all that. But those were their schools, and they were contained within a certain geographical area. And so when you take 20,000, 50,000 people and displace them within a year, now this is only one segment of Chicago. This isn't the whole city, because they did this all over the city. And these fights and beatdowns are not just occurring at Finger High School. But these children were totally wiped out. Their lives are just totally impacted upon negatively in an instant. And then they were told that you have to go and move over here. And over here was another community that was struggling and had already established their boundaries and their subculture and their sub-economy. And so these people were a threat. They became a threat, and everybody's coming over here to reestablish themselves. So you can't have anything but conflict. And in Chicago, there's this policy that is that really sets these children up to be sacrificed, where you have 3 schools in one building. You have 5 different communities attending one school, crossing many boundaries, and these boundaries are identified by groups that we refer to as gangs, and they have labels, and they have colors, identifiers. And so maybe in the school nothing happens, but how could it if you got armed police, you have metal detectors, you have locks on all the doors? Because there's no learning going on. There's no learning. Look at the test scores. There's no learning.